pushback that you get from executive leadership is always can you prove to me that the millions of dollars that you're spending for security is stopping things from occurring? And you start laughing and you go, it's like, that's the when did you stop beating your wife question, right? I'm supposed to, all of this money, I can come back with the flip answer and say, have you had a terrorist attack? No, obviously it worked. I mean, have you had a terrorist attack? No. All right, so I'm good. Right? It was worth the $3 million. But you look at these arguments that you run into with them, and it's trying to prove the negative, and it just drives you absolutely crazy because they're saying, well, nothing has occurred.
Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I'm Sal Lifrieri. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jim Henry. Before we begin, we're going to like to remind each of you to subscribe to the show and push the like button for us. Please leave your comments as they are important to us. So today's topic, lessons never learned. It's going to be probably, the fourth or fifth one that we've done in our Common Sense series. And we just can't believe that people could be as dumb as they are. And they just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So, Jim, we were chatting about this on the phone the other day, and we said, man, these people keep making the same stupid mistakes. And you came up with the idea and said, lessons never learned. Let's do a show. Here we are.
It's just painful. It's irritating. It's painful. It is annoying. It is frustrating. It is even nauseating. But it is predictable. The only exception to people not remembering history beyond, a Christmas shopping season was 9/11. And that only existed in New York. We actually had 7 years of true awareness and consciousness to the risks that we face for terrorism and security in general in New York, with the deployment of, turnstiles, and what have you from 2001, 2008. And in that period of time, I noticed because we had offices, this is the HPE days, we had offices in California and, and Colorado and what have you. And out there, it was like, by the 2002, 2003, 9/11, what's that? There was buildings, people walking in, no physical security, and you try to be, bringing awareness to this. The consultants were frustrated by it, but it was like, nothing's happened here. We're not gonna do anything. New York, it lasted until 2008. Then came the financial crisis, and this is probably why we're seeing what we're seeing now. The financial crisis hit in 2008. Prior to that, there was a lot of stakeholders in New York that were investing in, not only physical security for multi-tenant office buildings and what have you, but there was, it was both the optics and the reality of very visible and functional security. But they also spent money flippantly on the latest shiny object, partially because they thought it might work, partially because they wanted to just be seen as thought leaders to their tenancy, that they're ahead of the game, right? So, but the reality of 2008 was a gut check, that financially, we got to look at compliance and ROI, return on investment. And compliance, very slow to come. The only thing we've saw anything close to it was Local Law 26, in New York for, emergency, evacuation.
And that was a joke. And that was an absolute, the creation of Local Law 26 and how that got implemented. I was there while that was all being planned and put together. And man, was that, I mean, there were just some funny stories with that. It was just, what a sham.
Right.
It winds up working out great, and the end product is okay, but the process was unbelievable.
But on the federal side, we saw the creation of chemical facility anti-terrorism standards, CFATs. Now, the only thing the government ever really does effectively is create bureaucracy and hire a bunch of people. We thought at least there'd be a pull through, like with the COVID bill that had 9% of spend that was actually for COVID. We thought maybe 9% of the CFATs effort would actually materialize in true compliance requirements that would give clarity to end users of what they need to deploy, would give clarity as to what their savings could be insurance-wise, would give clarity to the security industry on what systems to be deploying. But no, that did not happen. It was when companies realized that if they did nothing, they would just get a dirty letter from Washington saying, you really ought to be doing this. And, without any enforcement, without any teeth, it was ignored. And to a large degree today, with the very minor exception that we've seen for utilities, for infrastructure, there is not compliance out there that is guiding, end users on what to do for physical security. So what do end users do in the absence of that? And in the absence of an absolute traceable attack that they thwarted with their security, what do we need this for? Right?
Oh yeah, I mean,
we got to make cutbacks. We've got COVID, that has the shutdown. The COVID hasn't done it. The shutdowns have decimated, the real estate industry and retail. And stakeholders are looking for where to save, and where do they look? Wow, we haven't had any incidents here. We really ought to, look at security. Do we really need all of this?
Well, they get you in the position where it's proved a negative. And this happened within the last 2 weeks with a client where you're talking to them and you're saying, we need to maintain the security, we need to do this, we need to do that. And the pushback that you get from executive leadership is always can you prove to me that the millions of dollars that you're spending for security is stopping things from occurring? And you start laughing and you go, it's like, that's the when did you stop beating your wife question, right? I'm supposed to, all of this money, I could I can come back with the flip answer and say, have you had a terrorist attack? No, obviously it worked. I mean, have you had a terrorist attack? No. All right, so I'm good. Right? It was worth the $3 million. But you look at these arguments that you run into with them, and it's trying to prove the negative, and it just drives you absolutely crazy because they're saying, well, nothing has occurred. And you shake your head. Years ago, I would probably get a lot more, pissy about it and would take it almost as a little bit of an affront. Where today, I'm like, we offer an opinion. You don't want to take it. You don't want to listen to it. This is fine, God. Just have at it. But, you talked about from the government side of it. And one of the things that I never really understood was the Safety Act, which I thought was probably one of the best pieces of legislation the Congress had ever passed. It was finally something that made a lot of sense, right? When you came out in 9/11, they passed this. And for those not familiar with the Safety Act, basically, it was to develop new technologies, new counterterrorism technologies. And because we'd seen all of this bad stuff that had come out over the years, they come out with this and they say, if you develop technology and you get it approved by us, sort of an underwriter's, laboratory thing, consumer, reports kind of thing. If we certify it, we'll reduce your liability. And for the end user, the motivation to use it is the same. If you use certified counterterrorism technology and there is an attack, your liability is reduced. Nobody I shouldn't say nobody. I mean, but very few people are actually taking advantage of that. And I thought that would have been a huge driver, and it's not.
Well, it's very similar to what I said. CFATS could have provided. It provides clarity, because right now we've got a vacuum. Unless you have a memory that's longer than a couple of years. I can make an analogy there in Washington, D.C., but I won't. It's just there's a lot of people with gray hair that have lived through multiple cycles of threats, natural disasters, terrorism. I still think we're going to find out that what we've experienced here with this was bioterrorism. If we ever get a stinking investigation going on where this virus came from, it's not the last pandemic, naturally occurring or other. And if it's other, then they'll be more frequent than the naturally occurring. We have to be proactive. We have to appreciate history. We have to know that it repeats itself, and particularly with security, bad things happen where the vulnerability is the easiest. So target-rich environments, particularly ones that have marquee value, just because nothing has happened since 2001, many other societies in the world measure time in centuries. In the US, we are so apt to just look at quarter-to-quarter earnings, quarter-to-quarter expenses, and how do we achieve that next, financial, objective? We've got to look at this we've got to look at a lot of things with a longer view.
It's true. We're very short-sighted in what we do, and you see it today. I mean, we talk to the clients, and they, hey, why do we have to pay all this money for security if nothing is happening? Let's deploy technology, and I love that, right? Let's deploy technology. And what you wind up doing is, the argument that I've been trying to take, the stance that I've been trying to take, is forget about talking about security as the level, right? When you're faced with talking to executive staff, and you're looking at security as being just a simple bottom line, it's a cost center, and this is what it's costing us. You have to go at it with, okay, so what are the fields that they really are interested in, and how does it apply? And so what we're looking at now is, okay, everything today is the tenant experience, these amenity spaces that are being put up. People are coming around looking at, or at least pre-COVID, and it'll probably happen post-COVID. They'll look for space in commercial properties, and they want to ensure that they can get their laundry done, that they can get the dry cleaning done, that somebody's going to deliver the lunch to their desk, that there's a place for them to go and work out, that they got a gym, they got all of the yoga, they got all of these amenities that are being the draw to bring people in. And what I've been going after now is, okay, so you want to get rid of security and you want the tenant experience to remain positive. It ain't going to be positive when the tenant shows up and they try and put their card into the turnstile and the turnstile doesn't open. Who do they call? Right? If the guest who shows up, who gets a little guest pass or a QR code and goes to the turnstile and tries to open it. And the absolute joke to this whole thing is, well, okay, if we got a turnstile with arm barriers or barriers in front that preclude you from coming in, why don't we just make them optical? So this way there's no barrier. Well, why even bother with the optical? Just open the doors and let them all in. So it's crazy. Okay. It's just crazy.
So that'll be a different show where we talk about the border, though. We'll take a break there, because that's a great lead in to the other collateral impact of backing off on security. You are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by Myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lifrieri, we invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and subscribe and follow us on our social media. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So the collateral effect of what you're talking about, the tenant experience, people coming back to work, right? They wanted to feel safe before. Who's to say that doesn't exist to a greater degree now, given what we've seen as far as all the unrest, in the cities? And, right after 9/11, some of the visibility of systems that we deployed after 9/11 were overtly positioned so that the public and tenants and whatnot in buildings could actually see it. Not only see the people, see the security guards, they could see them utilizing the technology. It gave them a comfort level. And an environment like that, even if you do have an incident or multiple incidents, because they see the people, because they see the technology, they say then, well, things happen, but they're on it. They got people here, but you back off on security, even if you only have one incident in a year and there's no visibility of a response, that's going to have significant impact. And that's going to impact the interest of when developers need people coming back into their buildings. You don't want to be losing people to other buildings because the perception is that they have security and you don't, irrespective of whether or not there's events that are happening there. That's where you're going to get the clientele that you want.
Back when comedy was allowed, and you could have a laugh about things every once in a while, and you weren't afraid of pissing somebody off, it almost turns into a comedy routine, right? Because it sometimes it gets so ludicrous it could actually be a comedy routine. I would love, they do these tenant surveys, right? Would you like to have your lunch, delivered to your desk? And, do you think that, 3 yoga classes a day is sufficient for your liking? And what time would you like it? It just, when it comes to security, it would be, again, the comedy routine, right? Do you really want to see a guard in the lobby? Do you feel intimidated that there's a guard in the lobby? How many laptops are you willing to lose during the course of the year when somebody stole it from your desk? How many muggings are you willing to put up with? How many inappropriate contact? It is so ludicrous and so stupid. It literally turns into a comedy routine. And you just don't get it. And you hear this argument about, the pendulum's got to swing and, it went one way and it's going to come back. Nothing is happening, so we don't need to spend the money on security. I don't know what else it's going to take. If you never watch the news, you would still understand and learn that crime is on the rise. Law enforcement is being cut back. There's reduction in law enforcement, the whole defund the police movement. Right? What more do you need to understand? Do you need to become the victim before you hey, we need security? Right?
I think we got to move the narrative. I think we got to change the vernacular, from, if security is a 4-letter word that's being targeted because, it's not sexy, it's not in vogue, it's looked at as an expense that can be cut. Let's replace the use of the word in more cases with the word safety, because that resonates, I think, with a more positive, view than the concept of security. But it's the same thing. We're talking about ensuring, the safety and protecting, assets and people and places. And again, that contributes to the perception, the sociological perception that you are in a safe place. I remember, I remember when, certain developments were going on back in the late 90s, even before 9/11, and what have you. And one very wise man that I knew who was, in leasing operations says, we aim to be, the high end, residential, property for mom and dad from Nebraska or Kansas that are sending their kids off to New York to work on Wall Street. We want to show them if mom and dad are helping Junior to, to pay the bill for these high New York rents, what are they going to be looking for? They're going to be looking for safety. We want the visibility of a safe environment, with both personnel and electronics and what have you. And he was right. And I witnessed, when other areas were struggling, in the different downturns that the markets had, those properties that understood, to follow the money and follow the concerns of the people that are, that are paying, are willing to pay a higher price, for where they're living or where they're working or what have you. And that safe environment, was key.
Well, the other part of this, right? I mean, we're talking about the personal aspect of it, right? And people wanting to feel safe, and you want your kids to feel safe and grow up in a safe neighborhood and all that sort of stuff, right? And if you take it back to the C-suite and you start thinking about it, so you want to start cutting security because it's the cost center. What about the liability? What about the fact that when that person gets mugged in your lobby, when that person's on the elevator or but somewhere within the confines of the building or in the parking garage or whatever, they wind up getting mugged, getting robbed, getting injured. Where's the liability on that? It appears to be, short-sighted, right? Pay me now, pay me later. You take away a lot of the security and a lot of those protections. And while you may not be paying for, while you're paying for it today, it almost becomes a cheap insurance policy, because down the road, you're going to wind up having crime going to occur. And in today's litigious society, you're going to wind up getting sued. And how do you defend it? How do you get there and defend? How do you answer the question, so, Mr. CEO, you reduced security because you wanted to save money. However, your tenant was assaulted, injured, and maimed for life, or even worse, killed. How do you defend that? And I don't know what those answers would be, or even how you would answer a question like that.
Back in the old days, this is long before 9/11. There were always those rocket scientists that thought they could cut corners and save money. And back when cameras cost well over $1,000, and of course several $1,000s to install, there was no such thing as wireless. It was all hardwired. They were big, they were bulky, and what have you. So some genius figures, the camera housing, that's only $50. We can save a lot of money. Let's just put in some dummy cameras. They won't know which ones are real or which ones aren't. I looked at that, and I, at least, even in my youth, I had enough common sense to realize, that's a problem. And anybody that is party to that could get named, because in this country, you can get sued for anything. So sure. And I said, I refuse to do it. I'm not, you're going to be giving because I always considered, that the security integrator was also had a responsibility, to be honorable to what was in the end user's best interest or not. I said, I'm not going to install them. You're better off putting nothing there, because if you install a dummy camera, it's not like, well, we installed the camera, but it broke, and we did, and you got some plausible deniability as to why you didn't see what was going on. But when you consciously install a dummy camera, you are giving the impression of security and intentionally knowing that you are not going to be observing it. That and sure enough, there were a number of cases of suits where women went into elevators. The camera was there. They figured they were covered. They ended up getting attacked. In the elevators, there were lawsuits. Of that was basically falsification of a security solution and what have you. And it's just what we have today now is there's certainly no need for dummy cameras because you have cameras everywhere. They're so cheap, they're so numerous. But the question is, if you're not doing anything with that information, right? If you're going to be cutting corners on either the analytics to be monitoring it, or in the security personnel that are going to be responding to it, or even in the storage investment for the forensic ability to be able to identify, where the crime was committed, who committed the crime, and to bring some level of justice or compensation there, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
It is not going to be good. And especially when, and we've had podcasts on this, that the confidence of the number and the response and the immediacy of response of law enforcement is certainly in question, with the cutbacks that they've had. So even more so, not a time for cutting back on private security systems or staffing.
It's a great place to take a break, and we're going to get into a little bit of the technology in the next segment. But for right now, we just want to take a quick break. We just remind all listeners that you are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lifrieri. We're going to invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on our social media. Once again, if you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So, Jim, we mentioned it a little bit earlier. You talked about in the opening, we talked about the shiny new object and the what people are doing today, and buying this new technology and trying to race. You love associating this with the old snake oil salesman. So
there's nothing new here. Back well over 100 years ago, or thousands of years ago, there's always been somebody out there selling something that is just too good to be true.
It's a lesson never learned.
We don't. It just proves that we didn't only it's not only social media that spreads fake news. It was even done in the olden days when all you had to do was stand on a soapbox, and hold up a bottle of something and claim whatever. And in a world right now where anything that's stated is taken as true before it's ever vetted, whether it's an accusation of what somebody did or whether it's a claim of what something does. I mean, we have so many tools today to be able to vet and triangulate and validate the effectiveness of processes, procedures, technology, and yet the immediacy of the desire for satisfaction at low price has us continuously drinking Kool-Aid that's poured into a bottle from somebody that we don't even know or see. And we just trust that it's going to taste good. This is material that will keep these Common Sense Series podcasts going forever. And that's really unfortunate. I would think that with a country now, really, even a world that has more college-educated people than ever, why is stupidity so rampant?
I can't get into a whole lot of detail, but I will tell you that I am totally disappointed with the college system, the collegiate system in this country, and the process and the products that they're putting out. Oh man, it's just very rarely do you get someone that comes out that actually has a clue about what they're talking about, or even has a rough understanding of it. Again, for the most part, I like to kind of bring stuff back to comedy, and It's the comedy routine where, you have the person goes through, 4 years of college and the degree and comes out with a degree in communications. And, you ask them, so, can you explain to me what communications is? And they don't have a clue. They can't explain it. 4 years, communications degree, can't tell you what communications is. And it just, where are we going wrong? And then, when we start looking at technology and technology solutions, and the problem just gets compounded out, and they just, and again, to keep this back to where, to the topic we're talking about today, lessons learned, right? Lessons never learned. Mostly we saw it in the 93 bombing, right? We saw that all of the snake oil salesmen that came out with technology and people racing. I mean, it was billions, literally billions of dollars was lost that just went down a rabbit hole. It was just incredible. And then we had, 9/11 happen and the same thing occurs, right? And then we wind up with COVID and we look at the thermal imaging, right? And we had the big joke about that. I mean, we actually did a couple of shows on that where we're looking at the stupidity of the race to use the technology. And it's just this repetitive pattern over and over. And what I'm noticing and what I'm seeing today, and let me know what you think, but I think you would say the same thing. As the technology gets more and more advanced and more, as the camera systems are able to do a lot more, the access control systems and AI being played into, becoming more and more part of these systems. Before it was worse where you had a camera in the very beginning, to short back to 93, you had cameras that, you'd see in the video image, and if the camera had an image, at least it had an image in it. But today, when you start looking at the different technologies that are being applied, you really have to have someone talking you through the process, explaining the technology and how it all interrelates with each other. And I think it's just because of technology improving, it's making life that much more difficult to select stuff. And yet the idiots still go out and buy the shiny new toy.
And the trap is some very impressive and technically true a la carte specifications. But that and $2 or $3 or whatever the hell it is now will get you on the subway. You're exactly right. It's how do these technologies interrelate with each other, and how do they integrate in with the ConOps of your operations to give you what really is the result? Because when a company's making an investment in technology, it's not about buying the technology. I mean, to a degree, like I said, you want to appear as a thought leader to your tenancy and whatnot, that you're embracing technology. But at the end of the day, you make a big investment in technology and you're still getting stolen blind, or you're having all sorts of incidences, on premise. People are going to say, "Hey, McFly, what the hell's going on here?" And that's why we've had Pierre Bourgex on the show a few times from ESI Convergent, and Pierre is an evangelist of the concept now that technology has become so intricate and is so entwined into providing you now a single pane of glass of all of these solutions and technologies that have to interrelate with each other. But at the end of the day, it is the functional value of what that system is providing to you in your environment. Hence, the concept of the designs going forward, we're going to see more and more of this concept called scenario-based testing, where, there is a rationale to the different types of technologies that are selected for a purpose, but then proving the effectiveness of that cocktail of solutions in the way that they are deployed, the way that they integrate with each other, and the way that they dovetail into how the staffing is going to be trained. and utilizing it. And I think, more and more, we got to get away from, there's a consultant that says, well, you've got vulnerabilities in these areas. He identifies, you should have cameras, you should have access control, blah, blah, blah. Then of course off comes the GC that's, has no experience in this area, other than how to buy stuff, and create competition. But they're cutting all sorts of corners in order to fit into a budget. And now you deploy a bunch of stuff, right, with the lowest bidder, and you wonder why you're not getting the effectiveness that you had hoped for. More of the investment needs to be on the front end, on the planning side of what's our risk. Get a thorough risk assessment. What are we going to target our effectiveness at and response? And the investment in the design includes the scenario-based testing in advance. On very large systems for public agencies and whatnot, we would typically go through different steps, of a design, a preliminary design review, a final design review, a factory acceptance test, and what have you. You don't have those steps, on most, commercial, security system deployment. But those steps are important, right? And more so, we're going to need to have those processes, as part of the solution, which include also, after this is all installed, is this maintainable? What's it going to cost me to maintain this thing, right? Do we have a plan for end of lifing of technologies that come and go faster than sunrise and sunset? And because making an investment of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and then figure, well, I spent that money, I don't have to worry about that for another 5 years. Oh, yes, you do. Operating system upgrades, changes, cyber attacks, cyber threats, right? It is not easy. So this, again, scenario-based testing, I can't say it enough. Scenario-based testing. People that don't understand what that is and why it's important, we'll have multiple shows just continuing to talk about that, because that's really the only way to insulate yourself from the snake oil.
Yeah, I know we're at the end of the show. I just, one quick pointer when you think about technology, right? And again, going back to, the lunacy of it all. Every time I think about technology and I think about, the executive staff, right, trying to work this technology and understand this technology, every time I'm sitting in these meetings, I sit there and I look across the table and I wonder, could this guy program a VCR? And today he's working on artificial intelligence equipment. Yeah. It's just that simple, folks.
Yeah. Abbott and Costello died too soon. They could have a number of great skits with what we've got going on now. All righty. So that'll wrap it for today. You've been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by myself, Jim Henry and Sal Lifrieri. We ask you subscribe to this show and like us on our social media sites. We remind you, if you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. Remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and of course, stream it at theriskadvisor.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you tune in again next week.
Take care, Jim.